Hey everybody, so today I'm going to talk to you about how to paint with coffee. So for one thing, coffee is not something you have to paint with if you have watercolors or something else along those lines, but in case you don't, or if you want to experiment, this is kind of just a cool thing to try out and see how you like. So I'll go through the process of how to do that in a minute, but really quickly I just wanted to show you guys a few images that I found online of different artists that actually painted with coffee. And how kind of cool some of their stuff was able to come out with. So just a little bit of inspiration. Okay, so to do this, you're going to need 3 glass cups, not plastic, because we're going to add boiling water to it, and of course some coffee and a spoon. If you have ground coffee, that works, but if you have instant coffee, like the kind that comes in a packet, then that would work better. So in the first cup, you want to put a pretty hefty amount of coffee in there, which is basically going to act as our dark color. And then in the middle one, you want to put like a medium amount. That's going to be like our medium color. And then in the last one, you want to put just a little bit of coffee in there. That's going to be like our light color. Because again, the more coffee grounds that you add to your cup, then the more potent your color is going to be, the darker it's going to be. So after that's done, you want to go ahead and get some boiling water. I have an electric kettle, which is what I'm pouring from, just so you know. So in each, you want to go ahead and pour about the same amount of water for each cup. Like, you don't want to add too much water in just one of them, because then that can, again, water down your coffee grounds and make the color not as dark as you would like. So again, try to keep it about the same amount of water. After that, you want to take your spoon and just slowly stir around all the grounds with the coffee. If you stir too quickly, you'll start to get some foam, which isn't like the worst thing in the world to happen, but then you kind of have to wait for the foam to subside. You'll see that I found that out in the very darkest color of coffee. There it is, the foam. Not a good look. Try not to do that. I messed that one up. It's really hard to not get it to foam when you're doing the darkest color, but just do your best. Also, depending on where you're doing this, you might want to have a paper towel underneath all of your coffee just to make sure that nothing spills and stains your table. Also, even though I said you only need 3 colors, which you do, I decided to experiment and just try my hand at getting an even darker color. Now that you have all your coffee ready, there's a few other supplies that you're going to need. So brushes, which of course is up to you, whatever you have, depending on the kind of work that you want to do. Also a pencil and eraser. You don't have to have that if you're just experimenting, but I wanted one. And an extra paper towel to dab off all that coffee. And this next one is optional, but if you have any cotton swabs or cotton pieces, you can always use those to kind of help erase some of your marks that you end up making or lightening up your marks. In terms of paper, cardstock would be good. Thicker paper is always better than just a regular printer paper if you have it, but use printer paper if that's all you have. Watercolor paper would be the best, but again, a lot of people don't have that on hand, so try to find the thickest paper you can though. So I'm just going through and showing you on a scrap piece of cardstock what each color looks like and kind of showing you the difference between the light, the medium, and the dark. So always make sure that you're dabbing off all that excess coffee on your extra paper towel as well. Keep in mind that whenever you're dipping into your coffee, try to go ahead and just brush off some of the excess on the sides of the coffee cup that you're using, just because since it's coffee, it can be very drippy, so you don't want to have way too much on your brush or else it might drip all over your page in places that you don't want. Also, with the darkest color especially, you might get some coffee grounds. That's not really a huge deal, it just happens. If you want, you can try to get it off with like a tinier brush. But if you just leave it there after everything dries, you can kind of just brush it off. Keep in mind that the coffee is going to be very runny, so try to keep your paper as flat as possible. So this next step is optional, but I decided that it would be helpful to find a reference picture of what I wanted to draw. But of course, you could always just draw from your memory or just draw something abstract or like a doodle. It's really up to you. I just thought this would help. And so I found a picture of a leaf, and then I actually put it into black and white just because it's a lot easier to see the light, medium, and dark tones in the photo. You don't have to sketch out anything, really, if that's just not what you're into, or if you have a different vision for what you'd like to try, or if you just want to, again, like I said, experiment with different brush strokes, that sort of a thing. But for me, again, when you're doing any kind of watercolor, which essentially using coffee is like using watercolor, usually you want to just go ahead and at least do a light penciling in of a sketch or whatever you're doing, just to help guide you a little bit. At least I find it helpful. And if you do decide to sketch something in first, try to just, again, keep your lines very light, just because the coffee itself is pretty see-through, pretty transparent. So again, you will see any really harsh pencil lines that you have. And again, it's always just a good idea to do light pencil lines in case you mess up, and then you can erase easier. When you're done, if you feel like your lines are still a little bit too dark, you can just lightly take your eraser over them a little bit. So when you're ready to start using your coffee, the first thing that I would recommend is identifying where you want your lightest areas to be. Because just like in watercolor, you basically want to start with the lightest areas and then work your way up to the darkest areas first. So again, I just went and looked at my photo, saw where all the lightest leaves were, and then decided to just do a very light wash. And again, making sure that after you dip your brush in, you're getting some of the excess off on the side of the cup as well. So after that dries a little bit, you want to move on to doing more of the medium tones. So again, looking at my picture, I'm just pointing out a few areas where I want us to just start building that medium color. So again, taking my brush, dabbing off a little excess, and then going ahead and I want to be neat, but I'm really just trying to make sure that I'm blocking in all those areas. So after letting that dry for just a few minutes in between, you can go ahead and start thinking about the even darker areas. Keep in mind that obviously we're not going to be completely done with the light and medium areas yet, but we're just trying to build up that color right now. So again, taking the darkest color, you want to make sure that you are being as careful as possible to not go over some of the lighter areas that you want to keep. now I'm going to attempt to use that extra dark color that I tried to make earlier, which of course you don't have to make, but I just thought, why not? So I decided to see how it would go, and I'm applying it on the areas that are extra dark on the reference photo. So the next thing I wanted to do was to focus on some of the veins of the leaves and some of the slightly darker areas in the really light leaves as well. So I decided that I would take some of my medium color and just put, not too much, but put a little bit of a light wash and start layering up some of those areas. So on a really random note, when I was letting this dry, I heard from the other room all these slurping noises, and so I came over to find out that my cat was licking my parts of my piece. I guess he just really likes coffee, and I didn't know about it, but to each their own, I guess. So after you've applied enough layers and you feel like you're pretty much done, you could just leave it here and leave it as just purely a coffee piece, but if certain parts are bothering you, or if you want to go in with details, you could bring in some brown color pencils or a white gel pen for highlights, or even just like a black pen. It's really up to you. Personally, certain things were bothering me and I wanted to blend out parts better. So I decided to take some of my brown color pencils and really help define some of the edges of some of my areas and add some of those highlights in with my white gel pen. The color pencils were also very good for defining some of those veins in the leaves as well, or just adding those in, or just gradually making an area darker instead of having to sit there and apply multiple layers of coffee, because after a while it gets a little tedious. An important thing to keep in mind, if you decide to go ahead and go back over it, some certain things with color pencil or marker or whatnot, make sure your piece is 100% dry and not just like you waited a few minutes and it's dry. Like really leave it there, make sure, because your color pencils especially will not show up very well, if they'll even show up at all. So just really make sure that you are working on a completely dry surface. And when you feel satisfied with your work, then congratulations, you've created a piece using coffee as paint, which is kind of unusual, but also pretty fun. So I hope you all enjoyed this activity, and I would really love to see whatever you guys could come up with if you want to send it to my email. But thanks, see you guys next week, bye.